Hey guys, we're now into session three. This is part three, session 8 of World War II. On this one, we are going to move to the war against Germany. Remember, when we talked about the Japanese, we're also fighting the Germans at the same time. Uh, America had a policy. FDR had a policy that was called European First policy, which meant we were going to try to put the majority of our resources into Europe to try to save England. You have to remember, this time the Germans were well dug into Europe. Okay, uh, I will tell you that in this war, the B-17 bombers will be very. We will use those things. We'll fly them out of England. If you've ever seen the movie The Memphis Belle, the Memphis Belle was a B-17. It was the first B-17 to reach 25 missions. And it was a big deal because most of these guys got shot down and killed. It was actually more dangerous to be a pilot in the Second War in Europe than to be a soldier. So, how did we defeat the Germans? Well, once the U.S., we teamed up with England. Once we got over there, we quickly figured out, guys, we had to get a foothold into Germany. And that foothold is going to be into Normandy. Now, the thing I want to point out in this next lecture, in the fourth lecture, I'm going to spend the whole lecture talking about the war against Russia and Germany. And that's very important, guys, because when we come into Europe, the Germans are at that time already fighting the Russians. Okay, and that war is mainly going to be in Russia, and it will be against Joseph Stalin's Red Army and Hitler's German Army. We'll spend a whole session on that. So I don't want to talk a whole lot about it right now, other than the fact just to tell you, once we make our foothold into Normandy, that will be the U.S. will be coming in. If you looked at a picture of Europe, you could quickly see you have the Eastern and the Western Front, similar to World War One. The Eastern Front is in Russia. That is where the Germans are fighting the Russians. The Western Front is where the Americans and the British will come through Normandy, which is France. Then we will begin to push through Normandy and Luxembourg. Okay, and us and the Russians will actually meet one another. So basically, the Germans are caught into a pincer. Okay, they'll have the Red Armies coming out of Russia, and then you'll have the U.S. and the British that will be coming out of France and Luxembourg, and they will pin the German army in. I've always thought there was a lot of cool things that happen over there. You have George Patton. I wish we had more time to talk about Patton. Patton was the very successful tank commander. Guys, Normandy, I will tell you real quickly, when we invade Normandy, Normandy was a gamble. Eisenhower, who was the Supreme Allied Commander, is the guy that was over Normandy. He expected 70% casualties. Guys, 4,000 men will lose their life into Normandy. If you've ever seen the movie Saving Private Ryan, that's Normandy. The movie makes it sound like that invasion only it took place in like a 45 to an hour thing. Guys, it took them 16 hours to take that beach at the cost of 8,000 lives. The first waves of men that came in were killed. Once we get our foothold into Normandy, and something I want to point out is Normandy, there was a guy named Erwin Rommel. And if you go to your PowerPoint, you'll be able to see a picture of Erwin Rommel. Now, Erwin Rommel was the German commander that was over Normandy. Erwin Rommel was actually a very good commander. He had told Hitler that, look, if the Americans make a foothold, this war's over with. Hitler believed that the Americans, even if we got into France, that the Germans were strong enough to fight us back to the sea. Erwin Rommel was right. Adolf Hitler was wrong, guys, because once we make that foothold, you will have guys like George Patton's Third Army and we will begin to eat chunks into Europe. The U.S. will then begin to move at heavy casualties. Guys, I'm making it sound like it was kind of a walk in the park. It really wasn't. One of the last things I want to do, because like I said, we'll address the end of that European war with what's going on with Russia, and part 4. And of course, part 5 will just be a summary of everything, was the Holocaust. What we soon found, guys, the Russian soldiers and the American soldiers, as we went into Europe, we found the concentration camps. And it really appalled us. Even the Russian soldiers, as hardened as they were appalled at what they saw. Basically, the Nazis had put millions of Jews to death in these death camps. I will end us really quick with something that I think is very important. Guys, I befriended a German professor. She teaches over in Germany. She teaches German history like I teach American history. And we kind of became friends. And during this friendship, we began to talk. And one of the things that she explained to me is that the millenniums, the Germans, the young Germans that are y'all's age, do not believe in the Holocaust. They think the Holocaust was made up. And that's very scary. And it's not all of them, but it's a large majority of them. And we always talk about in my class, if you don't know history, you're doomed to what? Hopefully somebody raised their hand and said, you're doomed to repeat it, Mr. Offer. That's right. And that is part of the Holocaust, is what we find when we get over there. In the last 2 sessions, guys, session 4 and 5, session 4, which is the next one, we're going to talk about the war on the Eastern Front, the war that was against Germany and Russia, which was one of the most brutalist wars of battles that were fought in this. When I told you guys that I did not put this YouTube for children, it's because of that lecture. A lot of my students don't know the brutality that went on. We know about the Japanese. We don't know about what happened between the Russians and the Germans. And that was some brutal fighting. So that will be next, and that will be session 4. And of course, we'll have a wrap up.